Why do people want to get involved in this from this point forward? I think because we're at a turning point for this deposit, and I think we'll get great support, and I think we'll be able to put an economic mine into operation over the course of the next 5 years in the Dominican Republic.
It feels to me there's a distinct cutoff. If you've come in when Eric has, you've got good value. If you're in before that, you're in a whole world of hurt and pain. What do you say to the guys who are well underwater on this? Are they ever going to see their money back? Hello and welcome to Crux Investor. First of all, thanks so much for watching this video. If you like it, give us a thumbs up and do leave your comments below because it just helps us understand the types of questions you'd like us to be asking, what you think of the company, and generally how we're doing to be able to make this product better for you. And if you haven't already done so, please click the button in the corner of the screen to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And of course, for more videos like this, click the notification bell. We spoke earlier today to Joe Hamilton, who's the CEO of Unigold. They're a TSX-listed explorer with assets in the Dominican Republic. 18 years in the making, so hardly an overnight success, but had a funding in October 2019, which involved Mr. Eric Sprott and seems to bring a new lease of life to this. So I think old shareholders not necessarily too happy. New shareholders probably feel they're getting a deal. We get into Joe a little bit, but he comes back at us with his ideas for building shareholder wealth. It describes their business model. So if you want to look at any of those topics or more, take a look in the description below. Click on the timestamp if anything interests you in particular. But in the meantime, let's hear what Joe had to say. Hello, Joe. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you. Sheltering in place.
Where is that place?
Just outside of Toronto in Ontario in Canada. I'm right. About an hour east.
Hour east, okay. And what's that behind you, apart from Egyptology?
Behind me, that is the Book of the Dead. It's actually a resurrection story from Egypt. Right. I sort of like the theme behind it.
You like the theme? Resurrection, okay. Well, let's get into the resurrection stories. Let's talk about you. Give us that 1 minute overview, and then we'll pick it up from there.
Easy enough. Unigold's been involved in the Dominican Republic for approximately 18 years now. We've spent over $43 million, 125,000 meters of drilling, most of it on one deposit, the Candelones and Candelones extension deposit. We've got about a 2 million ounce resource there. And over the course of the last year and a half, we've spent our time on infill drilling, doing metallurgical work, and moving this towards an economic decision. So with all of that, 2 million ounces in resources, it's about a $15 million market cap, Canadian. So I think there's a fairly good value story here as we move it down the value chain towards an economic decision.
Okay, great. Thanks for that summary. 18 years in the making. So it's not an overnight success. So what have you decided recently in terms of changing the story up? Because I think we were talking before, you have worked outside of the Dominican Republic, but you've come back home to the Dominican Republic to kind of create some value. So when was that decision made to focus on this project, and what is it that you're trying to do?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. The project itself really only took flight in 2010 when a number of new shareholders came on board. We went into the Dominican Republic, drilled about 35,000 meters of drilling, and defined a maiden resource in early 2012, which we put out in 2013. That was a large, low-grade, pit-constrained resource. And then, of course, the gold price slid quite dramatically in 2014. Which caused us to go back and reconsider the drilling that we'd done. We found a number of high-grade zones within the drilling that hadn't been followed up. Most of the drilling was done at 100-meter centers. So in 2015 and 2016, we went back in and drilled that closer space drilling around some of the high-grade material. And in 2015, we put out a high-grade resource, which ran about 5 grams per ton, about 900,000 ounces. That allowed us to start looking at underground scenarios for eventual production. Then in 2017, the concessions lapsed in early 2017, and we had to reapply for concessions. It took a number of years to get those concessions back, primarily because the government wanted us to move to production. We eventually did get the concessions back as exploration concessions and started work again in 2019. And we've had great success, if you look at any of the press releases, drilling some of these high-grade zones since then. So we continue to add to it, and the idea is to move this towards an economic decision towards the end of this year.
So, and what does that actually mean, mate, an economic decision? What are you going to have in place?
Well, there is, we've identified an oxide resource, which is a near surface, fairly low-hanging fruit, good metallurgy, easy to recover, as a starter area to start production. And we're probably looking at something between 30 and 50,000 ounces a year out of the oxide as a starter for 3 to 4 years. But then there's certainly a higher grade potential. We have to understand how we can access that, whether it's from open pit. Some of the mineralization is within 50 meters of surface. The bulk of the high grade, though, seems to be below 200 meters from surface. Whether we want to access that with an underground ramp, we still have to go through those trade-off studies. So an economic decision comes down to basically a PEA or a pre-feasibility study.
Okay, but no one's funding you off the back of a PEA. So how do you get into production?
No, I mean, obviously the PEA is the start. A pre-feasibility study, feasibility or detailed engineering are all things that need to be done. We need to start somewhere. We're currently doing metallurgical work, which will inform process designs, which will help us get towards the PEA. The preliminary feasibility study, which is done immediately after that, which we would expect to see early next year, those studies would certainly be able to give us better designs. But of course, we need to do the groundwork first. We have a resource, metallurgy is coming, and then we need to understand what capital costs and operating costs look like. And that's the idea behind the PEA to start with. But you know, these things are a chain, and you really can't skip links in the chain.
Right. Okay. So it's early days. You've got something. It doesn't sound very big. I mean, did you say 30 to 50,000 ounces over 3 to 4 years for the oxide component?
That is correct. The oxide component is a small, I would call it a starter pit or a starter operation.
Right. Do you expect that to be economic?
Oh, without a doubt. The metallurgy that we've done to date shows that we can get, if we were to use a vat leach or a tank leach, we can get about a 95% recovery from that in about 24 hours. In a heap, it looks as if it will be 2 to 3 weeks to get upwards of 80 to 85% recovery in a heap. That's all running at about a gram per ton, should be a dump leach. The economics on that should be very good.
Okay. I guess what I'm trying to get at is, you know, how do you go about planning this thing with kind of, well, how much cash have you got today? Let's start with that.
The cash in the bank at this point is about $250,000.
Right.
We raised $3 million last late September last year, and did about a 14,000 to 15,000 meter drill program since that time.
Right. So you're cutting it fine. $250. That's not going to last too long, right? So what are you doing about that? Are you in discussions at the moment?
Positively, we've got a number of CAs out with a number of companies that are going through our data room at this point in time. We'll also look to raise some money. We have a fairly good list of shareholders that have supported us all the way through. Eric Sprott owns about 20% of the company. Rob McEwen is at about 10% on a partially diluted basis. The officers and the directors own about 7%. We've also have a Cisco royalties, which own just over 10% of the company. So all things considered, all of those shareholders have supported us along the way, and I suspect that they will continue to support us as we go forward. So raising more money has never been an issue for us. We seem to be able to get it when we need it. But what we need to do is we need to tick off the boxes as we go through. We want to show people that we're moving forward with projects.
But you're raising it at, you know, discounts, because, you know, you're cutting it to the wire here, aren't you? So therefore your negotiating power is somewhat restricted in a way. So how much money are we talking about raising, you know, when you go through this process? Well, you're going through this process now, so how much are you talking about?
For the next steps between now and the end of the year, we need approximately $2 to $2.5 million to complete our economic studies. Most of the drilling's been done. Most of the infill drilling's been done. It's a matter of going through desktop studies at this point and doing the engineering. After that, of course, it depends on what we'll need to do as far as further permitting. There's certainly going to be some environmental work that we'll have to do. There's always community relations work that needs to be done. But in addition, there'll be some expansion drilling, I'm sure. These deposits are still wide open. We've only drilled them to about 350 meters below surface. So, once again, for an exploration company, it's always dependent on the context of the market, I think is the easiest way to describe it. You raise funds when you can, and you do work when you can. It's fairly difficult without having an operation with consistent cash flow to fund exploration. It needs to be done through the capital markets.
Right.
There's no other way to do it.
No, so okay, you've got a dilutive raise coming up, but it's going to allow you to do the program that you want to do. I guess what I'd be interested in understanding is in what's going up in your head with regards to the order of play, because you've kind of got a relatively small oxide play, which you think could be economic, obviously early days, but you suspect from your experience it could be. And then you've got a larger sulfide play, which is, does look attractive. Where do you spend your time and effort, and how do you make that decision?
Well, it's part and parcel of the same operation, as far as I'm concerned. The oxide, it's fairly small, but it's merely the start of a larger operation. The underground potential of this, we've got areas in our underground that's running, 15 to 20 meters consistently at 10 to 15 grams per ton. Those kind of widths over we've shown them to be continuous as well. Those kind of widths, once we can access those, should be able to support 150 to 200,000 ounce a year producer. But we need to start somewhere, and you always start with low-hanging fruit, the thing that's the easiest to get at. The oxide's at surface. There's almost no strip to it. It drapes over top of a hill. So it's really an earth-moving exercise more than anything else. Low capital to start, and can generate significant cash flow in the first few years of an operation. And that capital can then be utilized to build the rest of the operation to expand it.
Okay.
So it seems to make sense to me to start with that, show the market and show investors that there's potential for that, and that it's relatively easy to get at. It's a low capital. I would suggest that between $20 and $40 million would be the maximum outlay for getting a small heap leach in production to produce over 100,000 ounces in a 3 to 4 year period.
Okay. So you're in the Dominican Republic. Obviously, I imagine they've been, like everyone, hit with the COVID-19 situation. Before that, I know it as an eco-tourism destination with some fine bars. What's it actually like to mine there? How's the mining code, and what's your interaction with the mining ministry?
The mines ministry has been quite supportive of everything we want to do. As an anecdote, when we came to renew this concession, and the way the Mining Act works in the Dominican Republic is that exploration concessions are granted for a 3-year period, and then there's 2 automatic 1-year renewals after that. At the end of 5 years, a company has to reapply for the concession again, although the existing concession holder is given preference. And then there's an exploitation permit, which is good for 75 years, but needs to be supported by some kind of an economic study, which shows the government that a mine could go into operation at that area. One of the things the government wanted us to do the last time we came to renew this is they wanted us to go for an exploitation permit or a mining permit rather than reapply for an exploration permit. They were very supportive and were pushing us towards that. So, the government wants to see more mining in the country. And I think that we can certainly get there. They're very supportive. The country itself is probably the largest economy in the Caribbean. Deep water ports, 5 international airports, exports. There's more to the Dominican than just tourism. There's certainly cement plants. There's plenty of agriculture and a good set of exports that come out of there as well. So mining is a small piece of it. Keep in mind, Pueblo Viejo is there. That is Barrick and Newmont's arguably their best single mine. It's being expanded to about 1 million ounces a year at this point. So mining is a big piece of the Dominican Republic.
Okay. So why did your concessions lapse? You explained they wanted you to go for exploitation versus exploration. I get that, but why were they allowed to lapse?
Well, it's not that they're allowed, that they just do lapse. We were well in advance of applying for them again. We've held this concession for over 20 years at this point. This is our 4th renewal. And we've managed to renew it without any difficulty, every time that we've come up for it. It's a fairly straightforward process. It doesn't cost anything to renew it, but you do need to follow the mining code and do need to follow the application process. So once again, exploration concessions are granted for a maximum of 5 years, subject to reports and work. But what it does is it allows the government, if people are not working concessions and they're not spending any money, then the government every 5 years has the ability to hit the reset button and try to attract someone else in to do exploration. And that's the logic behind the 5-year exploration concession.
Okay, but I guess the government, you're suggesting, we're a little bit frustrated that you're not going for the exploitation permit. Are they getting frustrated with you because you've been there a long time and you're not motoring, you're not, hitting their timeline?
There's no question. We spent close to 14 months discussing with the government the history of the project, what our engineering was. I mean, keep in mind that when we started with this concession, it was a 20,000 hectare concession. There's 17 individual areas within the concession that show airborne geophysical and geochemical signatures. We had to go through and assess those until we found one or two that we could spend our time on. At which point, then you are at the mercy of the gold price movements, and you're at the mercy of the markets because we are exploration companies. But on the other hand, we have spent $43 million in country over the course of the last 15 years. Most of that has been spent since 2010, proving up these deposits. So we're probably the largest exploration company in the country. We've certainly spent the most amount of money and been there more consistently than any other company. That's not a complaint of the government. Their complaint was that they would like to see more mining revenue come in. Hence, they would like to grant more mining concessions. But in order to get the work done, as you know, the capital markets require a fair amount of engineering work before you move forward for financing of or putting something into production. When I started in this business, mind you, it was 35 years ago, the average lifetime or requirement from a discovery drill hole until something went into operation was somewhere around 6 to 8 years. Today, it's close to 24 years. And that's mainly because of permitting, corporate social responsibility, environmental work, and engineering that needs to be done, as well as the capital markets needing the information.
24 years.
That's what it is now.
You're going with that number?
Discovery till production.
You're sticking to that number?
I'm sticking to it. Look around. There's very few deposits that are found and put into production in a decade.
Okay, so if the government are frustrated, your shareholders must be even more frustrated. If you spent $43 million, market cap today 14 million, and we are not that close to getting into production, what are you gonna do? What do you think you need to say to people to say we now have a plan that's going to get us to a point where we can make a decision about maybe making some money, because there's still a long ways to go. You're going to raise some money now. You're going to make a decision soon, based on the economics. It's going to be too early to maybe get funding off the back. You're going to raise some more money to move it through to feasibility stage where you may be able to get into production. It feels like a long way away still. So how are you going to accelerate that process?
Well, the easiest way is to do the studies. We're through we've shown that Mother Nature has endowed the area and endowed the Candelones and Candelones extension area with some significant grades, tonnages, and thicknesses of mineralization. The next step now is to let humans get in there and do the engineering that's required. Step number one is the metallurgy on it. We've done a number of metallurgical studies. The ones we're doing now will be the final metallurgical studies that allow us to nail down a process plant design, which then allows us to move towards capital cost estimates and understanding what the capital costs will look like. That work will be done in the next month and a half. It should be completed, and we'll be able to get that into the market. The next step after that is to do the capital cost estimates. We expect that will take till September, October of this year. And then that will let us, once we've done those estimates, let us also look at the operating cost estimates. Once we get those together, we can then make a case for the markets that that this is an economic deposit and it can stand alone and it can go ahead, but without proof. There's plenty of people from all kinds of CEOs of all companies that will tell you that they have an economic deposit. But I think it's best to let the experts and let independent experts verify that and put it out in the form of a technical study that shows people that it can be done. That's what we intend to do this year. That was one of our tasks when we started in early January, and we're on track to do that.
Remind me how Eric Sprott got involved with this.
Eric bought, in our last financing, about 20% of the company in that financing. That was done in September last year. So he's been involved since then. He has put a significant amount of money. He's probably the largest investor in mineral exploration projects around the world in the last year and a half. He's certainly put a lot of money in. And I think his objective is that he wants to see things that have the ability to go forward. In other words, some resources behind them, and then the ability that at least a hope of getting into production at some point in the next cycle.
Okay, yeah, because it feels to me there's a distinct cutoff. If you've come in when Eric has, you've got good value. If you're in before that, you're in a whole world of hurt and pain, and perhaps not so pleased. You spend a lot of money on this, and it's gone. You're going to need to spend a bunch more money on this thing to be able to release the value under the ground. So it feels like a good time for new people coming in. But what do you say to the guys who are well underwater on this? Are they ever going to see their money back?
Well, that's I wouldn't want to tell you what my average cost base is. I've participated in every financing since I got involved in 2010.
Yeah, but you get a salary. You're picking up a salary. I'm talking about shareholders who are just reliant on the shares to make money, right? So it's a different.
No is the short answer. I started getting paid a salary in October last year when I took over the role as CEO. I've been chairman of the company since 2010, but haven't collected a salary over that time besides chairman's fees. Or board fees. But those are rather meaningless numbers considering the work that's done there. So I respectfully disagree with you on that. But there's also, what do I say to those shareholders? Thank you for supporting us over time. The verities of the market, make stocks go up and down. That's the issue. I would suggest to you that our shareholders get to wake up every morning and decide whether they want to continue to hold the stock. For directors and for people that are in management, we don't get that luxury. We are married to the company for as long as we decide to be there. I've been here for 10 years and we continue to move this forward and continue to push on it. But I've also been through 3 sets of management. There is some longevity. The board itself is pretty consistent. The people we have on the board are fairly consistent as well. But it's not easy. Let's put it this way: if exploration was easy, everyone would have a mine. Trying to dictate, how the market's going to behave and how the market's going to react is not always easy.
I get that. I think people have got choices. This is high risk, high return, or no return, and I think that's understood. But you've been through 3 sets of management team. Why is this time going to be any different?
That's great question. I guess it's going to be different because I'm in charge now.
But you've been chairman since 2010. Were you passive or not involved? And what was the relationship between you and the management team?
No, I was not an executive chairman or an executive board member. The management we have were qualified, they were capable, and they were certainly doing the job. As far as we were concerned, we, as far as the board is concerned, we were able to watch, execute our oversight, and get through it. And we did move the project forward. I mean, in 2010, there was a 400,000 ounce resource at just about a gram. By the time we finished drilling in 2012, we'd expanded that to 2 million ounces. By the time we got through the gold price decrease and came into 2015, we'd shown that the grade had gone from 1.5 grams, we could get it up to almost 5 grams. We have moved the project forward. I would suggest that we've been moving it fairly steadily forward. But like most exploration companies, these are stop and go. It's very difficult to keep things rolling, over an extended period of time. Even over 2 years, and over the market since 2010 has been very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of people telling the same story. So what sets you apart? Why should people be listening to you, especially with a track record? Why listen now?
Well, I think the reason to listen now is because we've done the groundwork. We are miles ahead of most exploration companies that are just starting with grassroots or even brownfields exploration. We've identified a resource. It's expanding and it's open. We've identified certainly the way that we believe the path forward for it is. We haven't yet put down the economic or capital cost numbers, but we'll get that this year. So at this point, this is where we are, let's say, adding the true value to the deposit. You can do it through the drill bit, which I think we've done. But it's very difficult when you are doing work at a $1,500 gold price and the gold price slides to $1,100, and then investors find other places to go. As a director, it's difficult to say how you can keep your stock price up when there's more sellers than buyers. And that's what happens in this environment when the gold price is sliding. People take their money elsewhere. The last, COVID panic selling in the market in March, was nobody could have stopped that. That was just liquidation. So, why do people want to get involved in this from this point forward? I think because we're at a turning point for this deposit, and I think we'll get great support, and I think we'll be able to put an economic mine into operation over the course of the next 5 years in the Dominican Republic. We've got great support from the community and great support from the government to do that. So it's just a matter of making sure that we cross all the T's and dot all the I's.
And get some money in. You need that money in now. There's
always money in, but there is this deposit is fairly rare, and I think that once we show people that there is a path forward for this deposit, I'm not sure we'll be the ones that are financing.
Joe, sounds like a great story. You've got a bit of work ahead of you. I mean, good luck with the race. And I do hope Eric Sprott and the Cisco and Mr. McKeown follow their money. It would be a big message to the market, but those guys are in a lot of company. They've placed a lot of bets of this sort of level. So let us know how you get on with that, and obviously good luck with the rest of this year and getting that PEA in place, because I think that could be the moment this company looks like it's actually moving forward with some degree of pace.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And things for the investors to look for over the course of before the PEA comes out is, of course, we'll have news on our metallurgy showing that the sulfide component of this deposit could be recovered will be important. We're cautiously optimistic with the things we've seen so far, but the final report and that news should be out in the next 4 to 6 weeks at the latest. That will give people a good step forward. The next piece of news after that for investors would be looking at the oxide resource and understanding what strip ratios and what pit designs look like for an oxide resource, so you can get an idea of both the metallurgy and what the oxides can do for us. And then following that, a resource estimate on the sulfides. I think we are intending on putting that out before the end of the year. We may accelerate that because it looks as if we won't be drilling for the next 3 or 4 months. So it would make sense to accelerate the resource estimate that we have now for the sulfides with the drilling that we've got to date. So all of those things will move, I think, the share price forward and certainly the story forward. And all of that will culminate in some kind of a PEA towards the end of this year.
Okay. I think that's the key word people are going to take away from this is accelerated. They want to see accelerated, lots of things. So good luck, Joe. Thanks so much for taking time out of your day. I appreciate it. Give us a call when you've got something to say. We'd be delighted to take that call.
Absolutely. Thank you.